Acts chapter 12, when you find your place to go ahead and stand this evening. Acts chapter 12, we're going to start reading in verse 1. It says, "Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James the brother of John with the sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of the unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Peter therefore was kept in prison, but prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. And when Herod would have brought him forth the same night, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and the keepers before the door kept the prison. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison, and he smote Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, Arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said unto him, Gird thyself, and bind thy sandals. And so he did. And he saith unto him, Cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. And he went out and followed him, and wist not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. When they were past the first and second ward, they came into the iron gate that leadeth into the city, which opened to them of his own accord. And they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. And when Peter was come to himself, he said, Now I know of a surety that the Lord has sent his angel, and hath delivered me from the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. We're going to keep reading, but I love this. At this point, the angel has smacked him on the side, told him, Put on your shoes, put on your coat, let him out of the prison, and now all of a sudden, of a surety, this thing actually happened. Wow, look what God did. Verse 12, And when he had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And Peter knocked at the door of the gate, and a damsel came to hearken named Rhoda. And when she knew Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness, but ran in and told how Peter stood before the gate. And they said unto her, Thou art mad. They're inside praying for Peter to be delivered from prison. When she says, Peter's here, thou art mad. But she constantly affirming that it was even so, they say, It's his angel. Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. And we'll stop there and let's have a word of prayer. Lord, I want to thank you for the time tonight that we can take to look in your word and to hear from you tonight. Lord, I pray that you will speak through me this evening, Lord, and just that you will use this time. We pray this in your name. Amen. You can go ahead and be seated. The book of Acts, I love studying the book of Acts. This last little bit in this series, that's where we have been, and I've been enjoying studying. It's an amazing but challenging time for the church. Acts begins, and you have Jesus ascending, which has him leaving, which makes everything that is going on brand new. There's all sorts of excitement that's going on in the church. The last few messages in this series, I've tried to point that out, the mass growth that is happening in the church, that we get excited, and churches brag about, if you have 1 or 2 first-time visitors, and we get excited about 1 person getting saved and baptized and joining the church, and we should. Don't get me wrong and think I'm saying we shouldn't, but we get excited about 1. Can you imagine the excitement when you're talking thousands saved, baptized, and joining in a day? I mean, this is quite a time for the church, and it's all new, and it's all exciting, and new members, and all of that brings more excitement. All of that brings curiosity, but at the same time as all of this growth and excitement and curiosity is going on, this was also a time that was filled with problems for the church and for Christians. Because while the church was excited, the religious crowd was not. While the church was growing and thriving, the government of the time felt threatened by it. And because of that, you have all sorts of people who were attacking Christians and the church. I think it was 2 weeks ago we looked at Saul, and while what I tried to for the message focus on was the turnaround in his life, and focused on the choice to change, that doesn't change the fact of what he was doing before that change. It doesn't change the fact that he was, in essence, a mercenary for the religious leaders to go and capture and kill Christians. And I cannot help but think that Saul was probably not the only one. Do you really think that when Saul changed directions that day after meeting Jesus on the Damascus Road, do you really think the religious leaders just said, oh, well, that's a bummer, he was our only option, and gave up? Well, since he didn't work out and we were planning on sending him, I guess we just stopped persecuting the church. I highly doubt that. So you had Saul, and you had men like him, presumably, that were attacking Christians and attacking the church, sent by the religious leaders. And then you had the government itself of that time that was doing things like we see starting off chapter 12. Verse 1 through 3, we saw it, that Herod is stretching forth his hand to vex the church, and he kills James, the brother of John, and we see that going on. There are some major factors happening here. I mean, you have the king himself has now taken it on him personally to vex the church. That's a major thing. This isn't just some guy with an anger issue that has something against you. When I was 17 years old, I think it was, I was working for a company, and they had hired another guy at the same time as me. We both started the same week. He was probably 18, 19 years old, and for some reason, I think I'm a very likable guy. He apparently didn't. Decided he didn't like me, so went out of his way every day to, I don't know if attack me is the right way to put it. Being rude to me seems too small, attack seems too high. Somewhere in the middle of rude and attack is what he did every day. But I'll be honest, I didn't care, because my boss liked me and my journeyman liked me. In my mind, this guy had no authority. I don't care what he thought of me. Well, that's not what's happening here. Herod is not just some guy. He's the king. He has authority. He has an army behind him to do what he says. That's factor number one here, but then also he's already proved that he's serious. Verse 2 tells us he already killed James. We know that this isn't just a guy who's out there throwing empty threats around. That not only is this a guy who has the authority, and not only is this a guy who has the means, an army to carry out what he wants, but this is a guy who's backing it up. He's already proved what he can and what he will do, and what makes it worse. The Jews liked it. Verse 3, it says that, and because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Because it pleased the Jews. That should not be the case. That really should not be the case. The Jews were supposed to be God's people. Herod is the wicked king who's killing Christians, and the Jews are pleased? That really shouldn't add up, but all that does is gives Herod more firepower and more confidence to carry out what he already wanted to do. Because he can attack and kill this small group of Christians who are opposed to him, and know that the majority of the people are going to be on his side. Again, this is a time of some major life problems for the church, but I want to try and look, and I've tried to, as I've said this, be specific in this. I want to try to look at this a little more, I guess, individual here. Because it was a challenging time of problems for the church. It was a challenging time of problems for the Christian. When you know that standing for what you believe might mean your life. Or when you know you have people that you care about that are going through some hard things. The easy thing to have done, I guess before I move on to that, people you care about are going through some hard things. I think it's interesting, verse 2 points out James, the brother of John. This is family. Yeah. This isn't just some person. This is someone you care about who just lost his life because of what Herod's doing. Listen, the easy thing for these Christians to have done would have been to blend in with the crowd. To just decide, you know what, I don't want to draw attention to myself. Verse 1, it tells us that he vexed certain of the church. Those certain are going to be the ones who have drawn attention, who are standing out as a Christian. I can see some who are saying, I just don't want to draw attention to me. I don't want them to turn their anger to me. They've already turned it at James, and now it's aimed at Peter. I don't want them to turn their anger at me, so I'm just gonna blend in. I'll still believe all the same things. I just won't tell anyone. The easy thing to do would have been to go to worldly wisdom, to get the mindset that the world is out to get me, and for these people could have said the government is out to get me, so I need to get all my all my weapons loaded up and get myself ready because they're coming to get me and I'm going to give them a fight. We see that mindset right now in a whole lot of Christians. Any of you who know me know, I am all for guns, and I like to have plenty of ammo. My dad used to be a chaplain for the Astoria Police Department. One of the officers used to say, and I don't remember who he was, I just remember he used to say, you can never carry enough guns, and if you do, you surely can't carry enough ammo for them all. I tend to think that's sound logic. I think that's good. That said, as a Christian, I should not be looking at what's happening in this world and deciding, well, I'm going to go, find a bunker somewhere in the mountains that I can hold up with my guns and fight off the government. I'll just say this, and you can agree with it or not. That's worldly wisdom. That's what that is. When the world was against Jesus, he went up in the mountains, but he went there to pray, not to hunker down with weapons to fight them off. In fact, when Peter pulled a sword out to fight them off, he rebuked him. Take that however you want, but it seems to me that it's worldly wisdom, not from God. So I should move on. All that is introduction. I want us to look at these believers that we see in Acts chapter 12. These believers, and I'm not going to point out there are faults in reading it. I kind of mentioned the fact that they were astonished that God answered their prayer and those things. I'm going to not mention those later, so I'm going to mention them now, so you know I'm not just ignoring those facts. But I want us to look at these believers faced with what are some major life problems that would rattle even the strongest of believers. Faced with the choice, do I fall back on worldly wisdom or godly? And I want us to see and learn from what they chose to do. The first thing I want us to see, they chose to gather with other believers. Look at we see it in verse 12. It says, and when he had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark. Catch this last phrase, where many were gathered together praying. They chose to gather with other believers, despite it being more obvious. Remembering the times that they're in. They are fearing for their friend. Probably they are still grieving for James. Now they're fearing for Peter, who is in prison with an execution day set. They already saw one person they cared about killed. They are certainly fearing for their own lives. It's Peter now, but you might be next. But they gathered together despite it being more obvious. Okay, I'm going to attempt this and see if it works. Ask for a show of hands. How many of you have ever played hide and seek? All right, good. How many of you have figured out if two people are hiding in the same place, you have a much higher chance of being found? All right, most of you, some of you still haven't figured that out. Newsflash, if you hide with someone else, you have a much higher chance of being found. A lot of kids can't figure that out. And so they'll hide together and they'll giggle the entire time, and then they don't know why. They're always the first one that's spotted. These people gathering together wasn't so, well, we have safety in numbers. No, gathering together makes you more obvious, easier to be found. If they are looking for Christians, it's going to be a whole lot easier when, hey, we have a whole pile of them, many of them, as the Bible puts it, gathered in one place. But they chose to gather with other believers for a few reasons. There's boldness in gathering with like-minded. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to be bold when you're not alone? How much easier it is to be bold when you're not alone in it. That's why mentioned hide and seek. That's why a kid hides with someone else in hide and seek, because it's scary hiding alone. You're in you're hiding in some dark place. For me, I've said this before. I battle claustrophobia. Tight spaces are not my thing. Have you ever noticed none of the good hiding places are wide open spaces? Never. Doesn't matter where you're playing hide and seek. Never is the good spot in a wide open room. No, they're all tight spaces. And worse than that, I'm super competitive. So I'm going to do it. So I'm going to hide there. Even if it makes the space tighter, hiding with someone else makes it a little less scary. It's why a bully talks real tough with his buddies all around him, because it's easy being big and tough when you have, 4 guys standing behind you ready to back you. That's why it's easy to be a good Christian here, but a lot harder in the workplace or in school or wherever else. Because here when it comes to God's Word and standing for it, the people in this room agree. Out there you might be standing alone. There's boldness in gathering with like-minded people. Another advantage gathering with the believers when facing life problems, believers build each other up. Or let me say this, or at least they should. At least they should. I don't know that we're always perfect about that, and there is very little that will bug me faster than a judgmental Christian who wants to tear others down for not acting how they feel they should. Believers build, or should build, each other up. That does not mean that there's not correction and teaching when needed. That's a very biblical concept. It does not mean we ignore sin, but it does mean that we ought to be seeking ways to build each other up. We are a body. Last night, I stubbed my big toe, and I split my big toe wide open. I did not split my big toe wide open and look at my toe and get mad and say, "You stupid big toe, how dare you stumble." No, you can ask my family. I hobbled around and complained about my toe hurting and eventually cleaned it up. I helped my big toe because and I know this is a goofy example, just give me this, okay? Because it is part of my body, and it's hurting, having a problem, affects my entire body. So I help it. Hey, these believers, when faced with a major life problem, chose to gather with other believers because there is boldness and help being with like-minded people, with the body. Number 2, they chose to take their problems to God. They chose to take their problem to God. We're going to look at verse 5 and verse 12. Peter, therefore, was kept in the prison, end of verse 5. But prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. Verse 12, we just looked at a minute ago. When he considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. This is, honestly, this is a major key. There is certainly benefits to to taking our problems to godly people who can help us through. And I do stress to godly people. Going to just anyone and spewing your guts does not help, but going to someone who can point you in the right direction really does. But it shouldn't just be, well, I went to, godly counsel. And we need to go to God. Notice a few things about this when they went to God. It says that they prayed without ceasing. This is not a matter of, well, we have a problem, so we're going to gather together and have some social gathering where we're going to get together and eat dinner because, that's the Baptist thing to do, and then we're going to pray for 5 minutes. No, this was a serious matter, so they put serious prayer into it. So it was a serious thing, so they put serious prayer. But very, very, very often we put way too little stock into the power of prayer. I don't know if we don't know or we don't believe, but God really answers prayer. He really does. There's power in prayer. God really does hear when you pray. God really does answer your prayer. There is comfort in prayer and there is strength in prayer. This was a serious thing. Again, they're talking about their friend, their loved one, their family member who's sentenced to death. This is a serious thing. So that this wasn't just a flippant prayer. They prayed without ceasing. Thinking about it while I was studying this, I think I have had an extremely blessed life, where God has really taken great care of me and have had things pretty easy compared to some people. That's not to say that there haven't been some challenging things. And I know everyone in their life has faced different things, some more challenging than others. You can ask my family. My wife and I have faced some things over the nearly 17 years in January that we've been married that have been some major challenges, some problems that I looked at and I thought, I don't know how we get through that. I will never forget the day that I was told I had to shut down the door or shut down my business to avoid more penalties and would still be responsible to pay nearly $100,000 in debt that the business had. And oh, by the way, that meant losing my house, my truck, and my dog. That is a major life problem and kind of sounds like a country song. It's a major life problem. Let me tell you, when I got that phone call, I didn't just spend 5 minutes in prayer and move on because it was serious. And I'm not going to go into all of the details, but God answered in some ways that I still look back at and think, I have no idea how that worked. I have no idea what happened there. And I really believe it was because I prayed. They prayed without ceasing. This was a serious thing. Notice also they prayed with others, which is a biblical model. Not only is it a biblical model, not only does God promise that where two or more are gathered, he is in the midst, but also praying with others, I guess I'm going to look at this from the practical side for a moment. It helps. It's helpful to us. There's something about when you come, whether it's to an altar or whether it's wherever, but there's something about when you come to an altar or you go to pray over some serious life problem that you have, and you can pray with someone that you know cares and that you know takes it as serious as you do. I've said it before. I have some people, some in this room, some who are pastor friends of mine and others, but people that I know, if I have something serious that I need prayer for, that I go to, because I know they're going to take it as serious as I am. The reason I go to them is because it is helpful to me to know that they are going to God for me. They chose to gather with the believers. They chose to take their problems to God. The third thing I want us to see, they waited for God to deliver. They waited, which is a struggle for us. It's a struggle for us. We don't tend to be patient. It's a struggle for us. They waited for God to come through. They They didn't pray and then go break Peter out of the prison themselves. They didn't decide, well, I'm gonna pray, and then I'm gonna take this into my own hands, and I'm gonna, break our friend out of prison. We're just gonna, the many of us that are gathered here, we're all just gonna rush the prison and get him out. That's what we do a lot of times, isn't it? I'm gonna pray about this because I know it is the Christian thing to do, and then I'm gonna go do it myself. I'm going to come up with my own plan to do it in my own strength, and I'm just going to figure out a way that I can do this. I'll take this to God, and then I'm coming up with my own. They didn't pray and then go break him out themselves. They didn't pray once and then give up. Again, this was serious. This was the life of someone that they cared about. They didn't pray for him once and decide, well, God hasn't delivered him yet, so I guess it just isn't his will. No, they prayed and continued praying until God delivered. They prayed when he was taken to prison, and I don't know exactly what the time span was in here. I don't believe it was just one night. Took him to prison. They decided to wait until after Easter to actually execute him, and it says that this happened the night before he was supposed to get executed. I don't believe that was all in one day's time. But we see as soon as he was taken to prison, verse 3 tells us that they got together and started praying, and they were still praying when he was out. They just kept praying. And we're still praying when Peter interrupted them by knocking on the door to let them know, hey, God answered. They just stayed together, and they just kept praying until God answered, until God delivered. That is a different kind of prayer than we're often willing to have. It really is. More often than not, our prayer is, our prayer life is shallow at best. And the idea of, well, I have this going on, and if we're just looking at it simply in this context, I have this friend of mine who is wrongly taken to prison, going to be killed for what he believes, and so I'm going to pray from the moment that he is taken until the moment that he is delivered, however long that is. Well, that is a different kind of prayer than we're normally willing to put the work in for. We're not willing to be that patient for it. They just prayed until God delivered. Conclusion this evening. I said this at the start. We all face life problems, and like I said, they are different for each person. But we all face them. And you have a choice on how you handle those problems. You can go to worldly wisdom, and you can go with what makes sense to you and what you think, well, I can do this in my own strength. Or you can handle it God's way. Choose to gather with God's people for boldness and strength. Choose to take it to God, and choose to wait for him to deliver. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you will Lord, help us to really grasp a hold of this. It is, when you're looking at the book of Acts, the time that these people were in is such an amazing time with the growth and the things happening in the church, but such a challenging time with the persecution and those things that were going on, Lord. And the easy thing for these Christians to do after seeing what happened to James, after seeing what's happening to Peter, the easy thing to do would have been to go into hiding. The easy thing to do would have been to just, I'm going to be a Christian, but I'm not going to be noticed. And instead, these people gathered together, got with like-minded believers, and took their petitions to you, and just kept praying until they saw you deliver. Lord, I pray that you'll help us to have that kind of relationship with you, where when we are facing those life problems, those things that alter who we are, we make the choice to handle them your way. We make the choice to get with like-minded believers, and we make the choice to come to you and just to wait, praying until you deliver. Pray this in your